It is 7:07. Let's get an update on the morning ride to work. In our Team Hochberg Traffic Center, Jim Telemonte.
Northbound Tri-State traffic is very heavy. 87th Street to the Hinsdale Oasis. There's a rollover semi-trailer at the Oasis, but it's slowing traffic on the tollway. Metra inbound trains are not running on the Heritage Corridor line. This is due to a freight train derailment south of Union Station. Inbound Kennedy, delays start at Cumberland. It's 32 minutes O'Hare to downtown, 16 from Montrose, 12 in the Express, outbound 25 to the airport. Eisenhower, 42 minutes, 390 to downtown, outbound 26. Northbound I-55 is heavy, 126 to Weber. Then it's 40 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. The Ryan, 19 minutes, 95th to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with our AccuWeather meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Patchy fog this morning, otherwise a sunny day. High today 92, partly cloudy warm, thunderstorm toward dawn tonight, low 72. Clouds and sun, thunderstorm in spots tomorrow, the high tomorrow 86. Plan with confidence, download the AccuWeather app today. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
77 at O'Hare. Next news 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The battle rages on in Loudoun County, Virginia, over the curriculum there by the neo-racists in charge of that school district. That school board is getting an earful. We played yesterday a Fairfax County public school teacher who has her kids in the Loudoun County public schools. I mean, this dates back a couple months now, where that one father came in and basically said, "Do your job or we're going to replace you," in less than hushed tones. So now we have
who's up next?
Very interesting perspective. A Virginia mom who endured Mao's Cultural Revolution. Her name is She Van Fleet, and this is what she had to say.
I've been very alarmed about what's going on in our school. You are now training our children to be social justice warriors and to loathe our country and our history. Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. Wow. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist, old statues, books, and anything else. We are also encouraged to report on each other, just like the Student Equity Ambassador Program and the bias reporting system. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Van Fleet. It's what we've been saying on this show for several years now, and she's exactly right. This is the key to understanding it. Don't get fooled by Black Lives Matter being about race. Black Lives Matter is about Marxism, for example. We're just using race now in place of class, like as Mao used it. By the way, the Cultural Revolution, just a reminder, that glorious revolution, between 1 million and 20 million people murdered by the Chinese communists under Mao. The range is so wide because the details are so sketchy. Yeah, imagine that.
They don't want us to know.
I'm glad we learned the lesson from Chinese communists. I'm glad we learned the lesson as we're trying to figure out whether or not the COVID-19 virus leaked from the Wuhan virology lab. I'm glad we understand who we're dealing with in historical context. And I'm glad we understand, well, Ms. Van Fleet does, but I'm glad we completely don't understand what the people in charge of our cultural and civic institutions, not to mention at present our federal government, are doing, whether they're doing so wittingly or not. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Dominic Green. He is the deputy editor of the Spectator's World Edition. Dominic, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Hello, Dan. Hello, Amy.
And of course, what we're talking about here in Loudoun County, Virginia, in America, is besetting the West generally. So everybody is reading Mao's Little Red Book, whether they think they are or not.
Yeah, it's quite astonishing. It's one thing for a people not to learn from their own history, but not to learn from one of the major events of the 20th century. The tyranny of Mao is astounding. And this is completely voluntary. Again, it's one thing to force people to behave in a certain way, but this is a society injuring itself entirely voluntary. And this has been a long time in the making. This goes back to the slow takeover of our educational institutions, going back decades. And it will end, as the Cultural Revolution ended, in a kind of social disaster.
Yeah, in one form or the other, hopefully not with the body count that Mao inflicted upon China, but it's going to end badly. And so the sooner it ends, the better, because, it's a cancer. So the sooner you treat it, the better.
It certainly is. And the good news is, of course, is that school boards and school districts, these are forms of accountability. These people are employees of the taxpayers, and they are taking liberties, because most people are happy to know that the teachers are teaching. It's only now that we're forced to pay close attention to what is being taught, because it's breaking this unspoken deal not to teach the kids nonsense, not to teach them things which are damaging to society and indeed to themselves. But there are means of holding schools accountable, and we have to use these.
So, Dominic, you wrote a great article in the New York Post about the president reviving the National Lampoon series on his trip to England for the G7 summit. Can you explain that, please?
I did. Well, when I saw the footage of the president in Cornwall, England, for the G7 summit, I was reminded of that great ambassador for American values, Clark Griswold, who packed his family up and took them to Europe. And Europe was never the same afterwards. As you know, President Biden has a unique ability. He's like a contortionist. He can put his foot in his mouth from any angle. And of course, they managed to do it again. The usual combination of putting your foot in it and then not turning up for the press conference. The putting the foot of it part was done in advance of his trip when a warning is called a démarche, which actually I thought was a kind of pastry.
Sounds like that. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? A démarche is when you send your diplomats to tell off the other side. It's usually what they do, to your enemies. It's the sort of thing when the Russians are caught spying, you issue a démarche. This time it's sent to your allies, and basically it was an order given to Boris Johnson's government to surrender to the European Union in these ongoing economic negotiations that are the legacy of Brexit, because they have to work out new terms for every kind of exchange. And believe it or not, the subject this week is sausages, because in Europe, sausages are made of meat, probably from horses and donkeys. But in Britain, everybody knows that sausages are made from sawdust. We had a similar thing about chocolate, which in Europe is made from chocolate, and in Britain is made from sort of vegetable fats and caramel coloring. Yeah. So the sausage war is going on, and this is the thin end of the economic wedge. The Biden administration is very concerned, as the European Union is, that Northern Ireland will break down. There'll be a resumption of violence. And so he's basically issued orders to Britain to surrender. And the problem, of course, in this is that Northern Ireland is actually part of a democratic state, the UK. And if the people of Northern Ireland wish to join the Republic, well, there is a provision for a referendum. And I personally would be perfectly happy to let them decide and go their own way. And I think most people in Britain feel that. But you can't just give orders. Well, you can, but people won't obey them. They always backfire. President Obama famously went to London and told the British that if they voted for Brexit, they'd be in the back of the queue. Well, they did it anyway. And in part, they did it because nothing is so gratifying as telling him to get off, basically. And so people in Britain are now furious at President Biden about this.
It looks like somebody may be in line for a Macron-style bitch slap. What do
Well,
you
that guy
think?
got 4 months in jail yesterday. He was sentenced to 4 months for that.
And you know what he said?
I'd do it.
You know what he
I'd
said?
take the
It
day.
was
I'd
worth
do
it.
the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd
Yeah.
take 4 months in jail for
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Totally. By the way you describe British food, and you wonder why you have the reputation you have the world over for your food.
Oh yeah, I say to it's a wonderful country. It's very COVID safe. Just make sure that you bring a suitcase full of food, and also perhaps one of those portable AC units, because there's no AC in Britain either.
Were you in the receiving line for an elbow bump from Jill and Joe with
For some
Bojo?
strange reason, I haven't yet received an invitation.
No. Interesting.
I'd be happy to do it. I'm happy to receive a slap from Jill for not observing the correct COVID protocols, But no, for some, it must be lost in the mail somewhere.
Speaking of,
Are they masked up everywhere? The Bidens?
of course they are. Speaking of COVID protocols, what is the status in Britain? Because Bojo was a bit of a lockdowner too.
Yeah, he was. I think he's been badly advised about this. He's an interesting figure because the public seem to like him and he's very charismatic, but his own party don't really trust him, and he doesn't have many natural allies in his own party. It's quite like Winston Churchill in this regard. And so he has to say yes to everybody, I think, to keep them all on side. And I don't think he was well advised about the lockdowns. The good news is, as I said, there is now very little COVID in Britain. They're still worried about it. Personally, I think that they probably deal with that if people there started washing their hands.
Well, and one of the things that he did well, actually, though, if you, it is part of this debate, if you take this position, which I do, is first jabs first. Get the vaccine distributed. We're not going to, sort of stockpile and, move like government usually moves at the speed of molasses. First jabs first. Let's get jabs in people's arms who want to get vaccinated. That has a high degree of efficacy, too. And we want to get as many people with some immunization as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. They didn't waste 2 jabs immediately. They spread it as widely as they could. And we remember, of course, at the time, the CDC naturally said that this was the wrong thing to do. And naturally, of course, it turned out to be the right thing to do. And the CDC were wrong. And it has worked. And now they've got so many jabs stocked up that they're giving everybody their second jabs and so on. And the uptake has been very high as well. So it has worked out. And as usual, Boris Johnson, being the cheeky chappy he is, has surfaced at the end of this very much on top of the polls and with no challenges. So he's wiggled his way through yet again.
Yeah, well, that's actually an issue. I mean, thinking about it in this country is, if there is not a reckoning for some of these COVIDian lockdown politicians, a political reckoning, an electoral reckoning, then
there's no hope.
Then you're going to see this again. Then there will be very few lessons learned that should have been learned.
Oh, absolutely. And the moment that I heard that the probe, which had been launched into the origins of COVID-19 by the Trump administration, was closed down by the Biden administration, which then opened its own probe, the moment you hear that and you think, well, that's just a good way of whitewashing it and heading it off and never really getting to the bottom of this, never really learning the lessons. I have to say that the announcement this week about onshoring supply chains is a positive sign. It shows that, that at least they're not going to find the cupboard is bare next time. But whether that actually goes all the way and turns into laws and proper stockpiling and preparations and so on, I mean, really, you have to have your doubts about it. The fact is, I think that the Biden administration would prefer the whole thing to go away, because this is a government of technocrats. And we now know that it was the technocrats, the CDC, who were funding research in Wuhan. This is a big metaphor for outsourcing as a whole. We outsourced research from the US to overseas, and then it bit us, not just economically this time, but also in terms of hundreds of thousands of lives.
Is it known or, common? Do people think that over there in London, do people think that it actually came from the Wuhan virology lab?
Yes, it's like it is here in the States, that everybody you speak to can look at the evidence as a sort of sentient adult and says, well, it looks on the balance of probability and the balance of evidence that this was a lab leak and that there was research going on and, it leaked out of the lab. And on the balance of evidence, yes, the US had a hand in funding it. Anybody who reads the news knows this. And yet our governments seem to think that we are all stupid or children, and they're acting as if this is not the case. This is how to turn a crisis into a disaster, how to turn a problem into a serious discrediting of democratic government. If they don't treat the public like they're adults and tell them the truth, then they basically make a democracy look like a sham.
Speaking of things laid bare, before we let you go, I did want to give you an opportunity to offer your own salute to Jeffrey Toobin upon his return to CNN's anchor desk there.
Well, I'm, his stamina I find tremendously impressive.
Yeah,
he's just kept going, hasn't he? And he's a hands-on performer, and I hope that they see the light and fire him again soon.
There are other TV lawyers they could have hired.
Well, no one with a certain panache that a Jeffrey Toobin has.
No, I had no idea there were such opportunities in this business. I've obviously gone at it the wrong way.
Well, maybe someday you'll be a Zoom star too, Dominic. Dominic Green, deputy editor of the Spectator's World Edition. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
I struggled with symptoms like frequent gas and stomach pain for years.
I was bloated all the time with daily diarrhea.
At first, I thought it was what I was eating.
I kept thinking it was stomach issues.
So I did my research and talked to my doctor, and we finally uncovered the truth.
It was actually EPI. Exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, is a condition where your pancreas is unable to help break down your food.
It can lead to symptoms like diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools.
And EPI symptoms can be confused with those of other common digestive conditions, like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, and celiac disease.
So getting to the right diagnosis meant being more open with my doctor about the severity of my symptoms and how often they were happening.
But there's good news. EPI is manageable, so don't wait any longer. Use the symptom checker at identifyepi.com and schedule a visit or call with your doctor to ask, could I have EPI?
Sponsored by AbbVie.
Oh, he's done it again. Mike Lindell, the founder and creator of MyPillow, has now invented the My Slippers that have 2 layers of MyPillow foam plus impact gel to help prevent fatigue, and they're made with suede, leather suede. You can wear them indoors and outdoors, and I'm telling you, once you put them on, you're not going to want to take them off. I wear them